Good evening, and welcome to Rodman Public Library, the 5th installment of our Forgotten Founders lecture series. Is that on? Is it on? Yeah, there we go. Which is being held in conjunction with Alliance's America 250 programs. Tonight's subject is Dr. Joseph Warren, and we're happy to have Sid Zufall here again tonight for this lecture, which is sponsored by Rodman Public Library and the Alliance Historical Society. Sid will give one more lecture in the Forgotten Founders series, which will be held on June 15th, when the subject will be John Hancock. The series will conclude on June 29th when I give Shreve and Stark, Alliance's connection to the Revolutionary War, at both 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. Two more local historical programs you might be interested in that's coming up this summer. We have some this fall, but I'll just hit on the ones in the summer. The Mystery of New Guinea at 6 p.m. on June 16th with Michelle Dillon, the Vice President of the Historical Society and a former librarian. She'll discuss the settlement of black inhabitants that flourished in the early 1800s in Lexington Township, which should be a very interesting program that's being held as our Juneteenth program this year. And then on July 1st, Joseph Rubin will give a talk on the Alliance City Band, and this is ahead of a living history concert that Rubin will conduct on July 4th in Silver Park as part of the city's Independence Day celebration and part of America 250 festivities. The July 4th concert will recreate the first ever Alliance Band concert inside Silver Park. So you should plan on attending those here at the library. That'll be at 11 a.m., I believe, on June 1st. But turning our attention back to tonight's program, Sid Zufall. He's a retired management consultant who traveled around the globe during his career. And when he was on the road, he was an avid reader of history, which led to his passion of creating biographical presentations and that he brings to these stories of compelling historical figures and pivotal events to life here at the library and other places around town and the vicinity. So far this year, we have learned about Abigail Adams, Mercy Otis Warren, and James Otis Jr., which was the subject in April, and was very educational and entertaining for those of us who knew so little about him. And I'm sure tonight's subject will be just as enlightening as we learn about one of the early martyrs of the cause for independence, Dr. Joseph Warren. Please help me in welcoming Sid Zufall.
Well, hello, everybody.
Hello.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to take a swig here so I can get ready. One more. Tonight, we are going to talk about somebody that I think, anyway, in my humble opinion, is one of the most interesting. And I say that because in the program, and I don't want to give you too much of a heads up here, but in the program I do state he is one of the most what ifs. What if he didn't get killed? What would have happened? And so let's get started. Everybody ready? Hey, you know, it's very nice to look around and see familiar faces. So, and I'm glad you're all here. So. And listen, if you like it, clap. If you don't, clap anyway, okay? Dawn breaks. Cold over the Boston harbor. Gray light. No sun. The sky looks uncertain, like it knows something is coming. Fog rolls in from the Atlantic. It covers Charlestown, creeps up Breed's Hill, and hides the men digging the dirt. The land is quiet. The harbor is not. British warships wait in the water. Somerset, lively. Glasgow, 74 guns each, silent and watching. On the deck, officers lift their sky glasses. They see men behind rough earthworks. farmers with muskets, shopkeepers in work shirts and aprons. No soldiers, just citizens. One man stands out. No uniform, no sword, just a plain coat and a borrowed musket. Joseph Warren. 34, a doctor, the most wanted man in Boston. 3 weeks ago, they made him a major general. He could have stayed behind the lines, stayed safe. He refused. This morning, Colonel Prescott offered him command again. Dr. Warren only asked, "Where do you need me the most?" So now he stands on the hill with the farmers waiting. The British drums begin. By noon, the guns will begin to fire. And Joseph Warren, doctor, patriot leader, spy master, will be dead. Dr. Warren didn't die, ladies and gentlemen, for a cause. He was the cause. The British knew it, but unfortunately, history forgot. But not tonight. Joseph Warren was born, ladies and gentlemen, on June 11, 1741 in Roxbury, Massachusetts, a farming village on the edge of Boston. His father was a respected deacon and farmer, shaped by the stern moral inheritance of New England's Puritan tradition. For him, young Joseph absorbed a principle so simple it could be carved into stone. A man's worth is not measured by birth, wealth, or station. It's measured strictly by character. Then in 1775, character was suddenly all that was left. Joseph was 14 years old when his father climbed an apple tree on their property to gather fruit. The ladder shifted. He fell. Mr. Warren was dead before anybody could reach him. No warning, no farewell, no preparation, only silence and the brutal arithmetic of a world without its center. That same year, young Joseph entered Harvard College. He was only 14, newly fatherless, and by every count, remarkable. Classmates and tutors remembered him as an intellectually sharp and socially magnetic. A young man whose mind seemed 3 years ahead of his age. He graduated at 18 years old from Harvard College. Soon after that, he made a choice that would define everything that followed. He chose medicine. Not as a career, he thought as a calling. A commitment rooted in that early lesson about character to the act of preservation of human life. He apprenticed under Dr. James Lloyd, one of the finest physicians in Boston, learning anatomy, pharmacology, and surgery at a time when medicine was as much an art as it was a science. By his early 20s, he had established one of the busiest and most respected medical practices in the whole city of Boston. Dr. Warren has arrived. Boston in the 1760s was not a quiet colonial town. It was a pressured chamber of ideas, money, and barely contained fury. Ships crowded the harbor. Merchants debated policy in candlelit coffeehouses. Pamphlets circulated like a contagion. Every tavern was a forum. Every street corner was a debate. Into this environment stepped a young physician who quietly became one of its most trusted figures. Warren treated everybody: wealthy merchants, dock workers, ship captains, and servants, politicians, and the people who cleaned their houses. His practice placed him at the crossroads of every class and conversation in the city. A young mother on the North End could not pay. Her child had had a fever that lasted 4 days. Warren came anyway, stayed 2 hours, left medication, and refused payment on the way out. He did that often. Word traveled the way it always does in a small city, quietly but completely. By the time Warren was 30, people did not merely respect him, they trusted him with their very lives. Among his patients, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, John Adams. In his earliest years of his life, a small boy named John Quincy Adams, who owed some measure of his survival to Warren's care. He stayed in Boston when many fled to treat smallpox patients during an epidemic. He risked reputation and sometimes the anger of his neighbors by inoculating people against smallpox, trusting science and courage over fear. In 1764, Warren married Elizabeth Houghton. Their home became a center of warmth and a growing family life. 4 children born in quick succession. He had, by any measure, everything a colonial professional could want: respect, security, prosperity, family, and a future without limits. Yes, he had arrived, and yet history was already pulling at him. Then, in 1765, it yanked. British Parliament passed the Stamp Act in 1765, requiring a tax stamp on all printed colonial materials. To London, it was administrative. To Boston, it was an insult wrapped in a threat, because it raised a question the colonies could not ignore without losing something essential. Who has the right to govern us? Are rights endowed by our Creator inalienable, meaning no parliament or king can legitimately remove them? James Otis Jr., subject of a previous program, lawyer, firebrand, and good friend of Warren and his sister Mercy, subject of a previous program, answered first and loudest: taxation without representation is tyranny. You guys remember that? Warren listened closely, agreed entirely with that. And then he did something that distinguished him from almost every other patriot of his generation. He got to work. He helped to found the Sons of Liberty, along with Sad Adams and Paul Revere. He began writing for the Boston Gazette, attacking British authority not with emotional outbursts, but with surgical, lawlerly logic. He argued that the government, without consent of the governed, was not a government at all. It was domination wearing the costume of law. His essays circulated wisely, were read aloud in taverns, and were quietly dreaded by British officials who recognized the precision of his mind that was behind them. But essays weren't enough. The situation was escalating. In March 1770, British soldiers opened fire on a crowd in King Street. 5 colonials died in what became known as the Boston Massacre. You didn't know this was a question and answer period. The city did not forget. Each year, Boston held a commemoration, somebody pronounce that for me, I have a speech thing, believe it or not, who had a commemoration, I can't say it. Thank you, Jack, thank you. I got 50 people here, and you're the only one that spoke up to help me. Thank you. By 1772, Joseph Ward had become the voice of that remembrance, speaking inside the packed Old South meeting house where British soldiers stood outside. He stepped to the front of the hall and said, "The voice of your father's blood cries to you from the ground. My sons scorn to be slaves." The hall erupted. The British were listening through the walls. Warren's activism was never confined to words alone. On the night of December 16, 1773, the Sons of Liberty descended on Boston Harbor in disguise and dumped 342 chests of British tea into the water. By the way, I believe that's about $3 million in today's dollar. Warren had spent weeks organizing the resistance, orchestrating mass meetings at the Old South Meeting House, building pressure, mapping the moment. When Governor Hutchinson refused to send the ships back, the answer came in darkness and salt water. Warren did not just applaud the act, he helped plan the Boston Massacre. When Parliament responded with the coercive acts, closing the harbor, stripping Massachusetts of self-governance, Warren was ready. Warren's answer was the Suffolk Resolves, drafted, delivered by Revere, Paul Revere, and adopted by the Continental Congress without a single dissenting vote. The British had meant to punish Boston into submission. Instead, they had handed Warren exactly what he needed: the colony's undivided attention. His most dangerous speech came in 1775. Boston then was under military occupation. The streets were heavier, quieter, more surveilled. And when Warren rose to speak on the anniversary of the massacre, British officials deliberately filled the front rows of his audience. A calculated act of intimidation. He looked directly at him. Our country is in danger, but not to be despaired of. Our enemies are numerous and powerful, but we have many friends determined to be free, and heaven and earth will aid the revolution. On you depend the fortunes of America. You are to decide the important question on which rests the happiness and liberty of millions yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves. He had just delivered a declaration of war to the men who might arrest him for it. At that moment, speech became strategy, and words became weapons. Picture a winter night, 1773. The sign above the door swings in the cold. A green dragon, faded, creaking. Inside, the air is thick with pipe smoke and lowered voices. Candles burning short. Ale sits untouched. These men did not come here to drink. Around the table, Paul Revere, Samuel Adams, a dock worker who knows which British supply ships arrived that morning. A merchant who overheard two officers arguing about troop rotations at dinner. A British officer's maid reporting what she heard. And at the head of the table, not because anyone assigned him that seat, but because the room simply organized around him, Joseph Warren. He listens more than he speaks. That is the thing people misunderstand about him. They expect a firebrand, but what they got was something more dangerous. A man who asked the right questions, remembered every answer, and never let his face reveal what he was thinking. When he finally speaks, it is always quietly. He asked, "What time does the tide turn?" Someone answers. He nods once and files that away. Upstairs, a scout watches the harbor through a frosted-edged window. The masts of British warships sway in the dark water below. Warren knows what they carried. He already knows what happens next. This was not a meeting. It was an intelligence operation. And the Green Dragon Tavern was its nerve center. It's still there, I believe. But what Warren built in private was far more consequential than anything he said in public. Boston had become a city under surveillance. The British watched the colonists, and Joseph Warren arranged for the colonists to watch back. His medical practice was the perfect instrument. British officers trusted their physician. They confided in him. They spoke freely in his examination room, often revealing operational details without realizing they were doing so. While treating British officers, he wasn't just monitoring their pulses, he was tracking regiments. Warren listened to everything and forgot nothing. He organized what he learned into a structured intelligence operation of extraordinary sophistication. Dock workers tracked shipments and troop movements. Merchants overheard officers at dinner. Tavern workers memorized conversations and passed them along. Servants reported what they witnessed in British households. Every fragment of intelligence flowed through a network of couriers toward one central line. Dr. Joseph Warren. He coordinated signals, managed informants, and ran a compartmentalized courier system years before the Continental Army had a formal intelligence apparatus. He was, in every practical sense, ladies and gentlemen, the first chief intelligence officer of the American Revolution. And then, in the spring of 1775, his network delivered its most important intelligence of the war. I like this part. I like it all. Inside the British command itself, another extraordinary figure may have shaped the course of history. General Thomas Gage, the British commander of Boston, was married to Margaret Temple Gage, a woman born and raised in New Brunswick, New Jersey. American by birth, by culture, by family, she had lived in Boston long enough to understand what was happening to her people around her. Serious scholars believe that Margaret Gage sympathized with the colonial cause and that she passed critical intelligence directly to Dr. Warren. The most sensitive British military secrets in North America were leaking from their commander's bedroom. In April 1775, General Gage finalized his plan. British regulars would march by night to Lexington and Concord. They would seize the Colonial Weapons Depot. They would arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock, cutting off the head of the resistance in a single stroke. The operation required total secrecy. But secrecy has already failed because the doctor knew. The night that changed everything. On the eve of April 18, 1775, Warren summoned two men, Paul Revere, silversmith, engraver, and one of Warren's closest friends, William Dawes, tanner, writer, trusted courier. He gave them a simple order: warn the countryside. Revere rode north, crossing the Charles River by rowboat in silence beneath the guns of the Somerset. Two lanterns have already been hung from the steeple of Christ Church, one if by land, two if by sea, signaling to Charleston the British were coming by water. He rode through Lexington, arousing Adams and Hancock from their sleep, then galloped toward Concord until a British patrol captured them in the dark, but later released them. I could tell you a story about that. But the warning was already spreading faster than horses could carry. A church bells rang in the night. Signal fires lit up hilltops. Militiamen, who became known as Minutemen, dressed in darkness and reached for their weapons they had hidden weeks before. By the time the first British column reached Lexington Green, the countryside was awake and ready. And shots fired on the green. No one knows who shot first, and historians have argued that since, but became known later as the shot heard around the world. The revolution had begun, ladies and gentlemen, and Joseph Warren had just lit the fuse. There is something I should tell you here about Dr. Warren's personal life before we reach Breed's Hill, because it changes the texture of what he did there. His wife Elizabeth died in 1773, 2 years before Bunker Hill. She was only 31. He was 32. He left behind 4 children. The youngest, Richard, was not yet 2 years old. Warren did not step back from the cause. He stepped deeper into it, raising 4 children with the help from his sister, while also running an intelligence network, organizing resistance, delivering speeches that could get him arrested, and building the infrastructure of revolution that had not yet declared itself. When he stood on Breed's Hill, June 17, 1775, those 4 children, Elizabeth, Joseph, Mary, and Richard, had no living parent but him. But before he went to the hill, Joseph Warren gave a simple order: get my family out of harm's way. The patriot who helped ignite a revolution was also a father, making sure his children would live to see the liberty he was about to die for. Some historians have suggested this speaks to recklessness. Others argue it speaks to the particular calculus of a man who had already lost the thing he loved most and had decided that the world his children would inherit mattered more than his survival in it. There is no record of what Warren felt that morning, only what he did. The British attacked in overwhelming force. The first assault was repelled. The colonial defenders held their fire until the redcoats were close enough to see the buttons on their chests, then unleashed a volley that stopped the advance cold. The second assault was also repelled. The third succeeded, but only because the colonialists had run out of ammunition. In the chaos of retreat, Warren remained behind. He was not covering his own escape. He was covering everyone else's. A musket ball struck him in the head at close range. He died instantly. He was 34 years old. The battle was a British tactical victory. They took the hill, but they had lost over 1,000 men, nearly half their attacking force, in 3 assaults against farmers and shopkeepers in one doctor. General Howe remarked, "A few more such victories like that will ruin us." It shook British confidence in ways that would not fully register for months. When they found Joseph Warren's body, the reaction among British officers was not celebration. It was fury. It was desperation. I can't pronounce that one either. British bayoneted his body and threw him into a shallow, unmarked grave on Breed's Hill. Some say, there are reports that they decapitated him. It was meant to erase him, a message to the colonials. This is what comes to those who lead rebellion. It did not work. Nearly a year later, after the British evacuated Boston in March of 1776, they got the hell out of Dodge. Paul Revere went to Breed's Hill, and with Warren's brother, John, also a doctor, they were looking to find them. Identifying any individual body was nearly impossible. Revere found his dear friend by something small and precise, a false tooth. An ivory prosthetic, yes, wired carefully into his jawbone that Revere himself had fashioned for Warren years earlier. That would have made you proud there, Doc. A silversmith identified a fallen patriot, ladies and gentlemen, by the work of his own hands. That's the only way they could identify his body. It was, without either man fully realizing it, one of the first documented cases of forensic dentistry in American history. The man the British had tried to bury without a name was found by name in the ground by the hands of his very best friend. When Boston finally laid Joseph Warren to rest, ladies and gentlemen, in April of 1776, the ceremony was neither small nor private. In fact, it was one of the first of a martyr of the American Revolution. The funeral drew full breath of revolutionary Boston, civic leaders, military officers, members of the provincial Congress, and citizens who understood that they were not burying a man, but honoring a cause. At the head of the civic mourning stood John Hancock, subject of our next program. I love doing that. For the people of Massachusetts, Warren was not remembered merely as a fallen soldier. They remembered him as a leader of a revolutionary movement in all of New England. When they laid Joseph Warren to rest, the city did not bury a fallen officer. It buried one of the architects of the American Revolution. And in doing so, they honored a man whose sacrifice helped clear the path for the nation that leaders like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Hancock would soon bring into being. But the new nation did not forget Warren's children. John Hancock himself stepped forward and said, "Your father died for America. America will now take care of you." He funded the education of all the Warren's children. Benedict Arnold, who figured, before his betrayal, sent money regularly. Mercy Otis Warren, subject of a previous program, though unrelated, also helped care and raise the children. And the networks, the courier systems, the organized resistance he had spent years building, all of it kept working long after his pulse had stopped. Years later, reflecting on what had been lost, John Adams wrote, wrote that had Warren survived, he would have stood second to Washington only among the founders. Second only to Washington? Consider what that means, ladies and gentlemen. He was the revolution's greatest what if. Had he not fallen at Bunker Hill, would we be likely speaking of President Warren right now? Will we be talking about him with the same reverence we reserve for Washington, Jefferson, and Adams? I suspect that's the case. But Warren's truest legacy was never about rank or title. It was about the work that no one saw. The intelligence apparatus. He organized the couriers. He held together fractious, mutually suspicious elements of our resistance movement that made them function as something coherent. He delivered his speeches that transformed anger into resolve. He sent the riders into the night. He stood on the hill when he could have left. Ladies and gentlemen, he did not simply die for liberty. He made liberty possible. He made liberty operational. The memorial erected on Breed's Hill decades later stands on the hill, the exact spot where he fell. But the truer memorial is invisible. It is woven into the structure of what America became. The intelligence methods he pioneered, the networks he built, the people he inspired, the writers he sent, all of it. The British buried him without a name so history might forget him. Instead, a friend found him in the earth. And history found him there too. Because on that hill, Joseph Warren gave his life, and a people found their courage. And when a people found their courage, a nation, yes, a nation destined for greatness, was not far behind. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Joseph Warren, the Doctor of Liberty. Thank you, Dr. Warren, for your service to our country. And happy birthday, America. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to take questions if you have any, if they're not too difficult. Judge.
Did the British ever discover the secret of Margaret Gage?
No. Only, I think, after Gage, I believe General Gage went back to England. She didn't go with him. That's when the truth came out.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm learning reliable records of how he assembled the Invisible Army. I mean, it's one thing to have all that, but how did he pull that off?
Well, I will say this about that. From what I've read, not many people actually could have done that. It was extremely complicated. And because of his intellect, some say he was a genius, but because of his intellect, he was able to do all that. That is a very good question. I wish I could go beyond that, but your question is very good because it was quite complicated.
I mean, are there books dealing with that?
Is there what?
Are there books dealing with that?
I don't know if there's any books or not, but he had, my goodness, he had the whole Boston wired up. Dock workers, maids, people who cut hair, right? Even citizens that were walking. Where there was troops marching, they'd run to Dr. Warren and let him know. I mean, he just had the whole city wired up. And even his, what's interesting, when I read this, is he had colonels and I don't know if he had generals, but maybe General Gage himself, as patients. And they'd come in and, you know, you go to your doctor and you feel comfortable and you start talking and maybe do a little bragging. And he made note of that. He could remember everything. And so he made notes of it when they left. And he had it down to the point where he would ask questions. I don't know how to say this. He asked questions to these military officers in a way that would not divulge what he was trying to get out of them. He would wrap it in some medical excuse to find out. For an example, how's your legs? Your legs are a little wobbly here. I noticed when you come in. Why's that? Well, I've been marching. Oh yeah, where you been marching to? See, he did things like that, right? Or if they come in, they had mud on their boots, and it was a non-rainy day. He would, where'd you get the mud at? Oh, they march us this way, and the whole regiment went this way. And he would just extract all this information.
So you're suggesting that if the HIPAA Act had been around back then.
Oh, yes. We would be curtsying to the king right now. Yes, that's a good point. Yes, my good friend, Ed.
Did he have any communication with Washington?
Well, I will tell you, there are letters between him and Washington, but in his era, Washington was not in command yet. He was still in Virginia and had not taken command and was not even thought of at that point as a commander. So, but there are letters between the two. But nothing, I think, what you meant to. Yes, Professor.
I would say expand on that a moment. Boston was a center of a lot of activity. If so was Williamsburg, Virginia.
Yes, I've been
And
there
I
twice.
wonder if you could comment about some of the communication between those groups, such as the pamphlets and things that were put back and forth.
What's
Thomas
that?
Paine, in a sense.
Thomas Paine. Oh, I can sit here next 10 minutes and quote him if you like. To answer your question, I don't actually know, but you are very correct about Williamsburg. It was a hotbed of revolutionary activity. It really was. And Virginia was essential to everything. And Boston started it, and some say Virginia won it. So that's about all I can tell you. Yes, Sarge.
Did they ever find his intelligence notebook?
No, I don't know that. I've seen no indication that they have. But that would have been something, had they. They probably would have rounded up all those British that were patients. Yes, sir.
Not a question, but a bronze statue to Joseph Warren in a small park in Warren, Pennsylvania, where I used to work back in the late 70s.
No kidding.
I drove past that countless times, but never took the interest to go and read it, but it stands there. It's probably been there for
Did they name the town after him?
100 years. It's Warren, Pennsylvania.
Oh,
It's
good darn.
Warren County in
I did not know that.
northwestern Pennsylvania on the Allegheny River.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that.
It's a nice big bronze statue there of Warren Kid.
Let me ask you folks now. Now's not the time to fib. All right? Who knew about Dr. Warren when you first arrived? Really?
You mentioned it previously.
Oh, I have, yeah. Yeah, I have, but I don't think I expanded on him, maybe, I don't know. I've done so many programs here about the revolution, I mention them all. Yes, sir?
Why do you suppose there are forgotten people like this? I mean, was there something in their character that didn't shine favorably on America at the time, that they could have, you know, that their life, yeah, I mean, we have Washington, we have all the big names.
Well, I'll tell you what I think about that. That's a very good question. Dr. Warren was killed at Bunker Hill. Then after that, a couple years later, Washington rose to prominence. Jefferson, Adams, and all the big ones, all the founders. So they got all the attention from history, and Dr. Warren took a back seat. And if you ask, I don't think they teach about him in high school, or I just don't think. I didn't know about him until I found out about him a few years ago and started reading.
It's sad because if they're more relatable to the average person, I think, than the bigger names.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think so. There's somebody else that died early in their life. Somebody asked me that question regarding to another program that I've done here. Anybody recall who that might be? I can't remember. Jack's my publicist, so I could ask him.
It might be one I wasn't here for.
Well, Mercy Otis Owens, if you Warren, was not well known, but she was very prominent. But she was not well known, although she lived to be, what, 88 years old? But she was a woman, a genius, but she was a woman. And I think that kind of took the wind out of her historic sails, if you would. You're taking pictures, make sure this cane is taken out, okay? I want everybody to think I got cat-like reflexes. Yes, sir, please.
Just from just said, it seems to me, just listening to this, if it wasn't for Dr. Joseph Warren, maybe there would never been a Washington or something, if, because of his basics down here caused the rest of it.
Very interesting you say that, because there is a quote, and I don't remember who it was from. I'm thinking it was John Adams or Sam Adams, said something to that very effect, that if it wasn't for Dr. Warren, he was eulogized. It was Sam Adams said it. Had Dr. Warren not done what he done, the United States of America may never been. Yes, so that's why I thought your question, it just reminded me of that quote. I should have put it to words. I think it was Sam Adams, but it might have been John Adams. Paul Revere was his very good friend. And by the way, guess who adopted his children a couple of years after his death? Well, actually, it was after the war. Dr. John Warren, his brother, adopted all the children, and Hancock paid for their education. They got stipends from Benedict Arnold. I wish you would have given them back.
Was the brother involved in the revolution at all?
No, ma'am, he was younger, and I don't believe he participated at all. But he went up to find his brother on Bunker Hill with Paul Revere. And Paul Revere, a silversmith, fashioned some sort of a dental thing here, right? That's the only way he could identify the body. Professor.
Not to take anything away from Mr. Warren, I don't mean that at all. But I think there are a number of names that we know of from history that if it had not been for them, the way the world turned would have changed.
No question, Professor. Thank you for saying that. You know, if you think about it, it wasn't Dr. Owens or Dr. Warren. It wasn't John Hancock. It wasn't John Adams. It wasn't Washington. It was the collective effort that really created our great country.
The man of the
But, yes, sir, very well put, Professor, thank you.
And we had help from other countries too.
France. France was there when we needed them, when we needed them, yes, yes, yes. And by the way, without France, we'd been in trouble too. Thank you very much for coming. Hey, we got John Hancock coming now. If you think you know John Hancock, well, you don't. All right? So I'll see you next month. Bring some tip money, will you?